the mic you want me? Sorry.
Hi, everybody. You do whatever you want. Okay, so we have Dr. Ron Schmid, Schmid, and Ellen Schmid. Goes by Ellie, by the way, for you callers. He is a naturopath doctor of naturopathic medicine. He was a bigwig, and he was chief medical officer and clinical director at the University of Bridgeport College of Naturopathic Medicine. I am also very lucky to say a friend of mine, client of mine. Both he and his wife are clients of mine, and what a groovy guy. It was a referral from a friend of ours in Watertown. I go out there, and you know me, a bit of a hippie. I live in a log cabin. As soon as I pull into the driveway, I'm like, yeah, look at this hipster. Totally did not knock down and kill more trees. He has restored the farmhouse beautifully to period. Has a gorgeous farm, didn't sell out to any McMansion developers, which I really have to commend you on. And overall, after 4 or 5 meetings, you just get to know somebody, and he's extremely intelligent. He's going to have a good story to tell you. I'm going to let him introduce himself. And really, he diagnosed himself at the hospital. So let him explain who he is. And the reason I have this on is sometimes you have to think outside of the box. It's not all about taking 50 prescriptions. Ron the other day in rehearsal said something, medicine does have its purpose, which is true. But if you have any naturopath questions, if you feel you have a condition which has been just nagging you, we have the guru in the studio. Ellen's got a pretty remarkable story to tell as well. So I'm going to let them have the rest of the show. The phone lines will be open anytime you have a naturopath question, 203-757-1320. And take it away, Doctor.
Thank you for the very nice introduction, Michael.
Pleasure.
Our stories are really, though, I think very nice stories about how a modern medicine can work together with traditional naturopathic medicine. And I don't think either of us would be here today if it wasn't for the wonderful things that hospitals, medical doctors, nurses, and staff did for us. And we wouldn't be here either if it wasn't for the things that we knew about how to do things naturally. It's the marriage of the two that has enabled us to have a wonderful life together, in spite of having really incredible things happen in the last couple of years medically. Ellie had a stroke on January 5th, 2011, Category 5 subarachnoid hemorrhage, was in a coma for 6 weeks, wasn't expected, 50-50 to live, and 20% chance of having any real functioning life. Went through 2 surgeries to patch the damage from the stroke and enable her to survive. And now she's playing the best tennis of her life and driving all over the state to play. She's retired, 58 years old, but she's got a little bit of residual memory loss, but she's got her life back, and
sharp as a great life. Yoga, tennis. I mean, you should see these guys. It's great. All right, keep going, please.
Well, my story is I haven't really told it for a variety of reasons, but I was supposed to be the super healthy guy. We're a naturopathic physician. We have a company called Dr. Ron's Ultra Pure. We make vitamins, food supplements, and natural body care products. And I've enjoyed a remarkable run of 67 years of outstanding health. However, I had a very, very strange encounter last July. I thought that I had the residual effects of Lyme disease that I had 10 years ago. I thought it was pretty much okay, but I still had a few symptoms, and the symptoms included swelling of the legs and extreme shortness of breath. And if you know anything about medical problems, you know that those are classic signs of heart disease. But I thought to myself, how could I possibly have heart disease? I'm Mr. Health.
Right.
I'm supposed to know it all. Or maybe I thought I did, but that was one of the problems. At any rate, my symptoms got much worse last July, and I after 11 days of real suffering and not sleeping and extreme shortness of breath, and not really knowing what was going on, went to the hospital in the middle of the night because I was really afraid that I was in big trouble. And I thought that I had residual symptoms of Lyme disease because some of the symptoms were similar to what Lyme disease mimics a lot of other problems. And I got Lyme disease in 2002 and had treated myself seemingly successfully for it, but had some residual symptoms. And some of those symptoms mimic all kinds of other medical problems. And so I presented at Waterbury Hospital in the middle of the night. And the doctors there, within about an hour, figured out that it wasn't Lyme disease causing my problems. I was diagnosed with advanced heart failure and liver failure. And, of course, in the subsequent days, I discovered that the prognosis for that was 3, 6, 9 months. You go downhill and don't make it, usually, unless something drastically different turns it around. So I was shocked, scared, non-believing that I was actually in a hospital. I hadn't been to doctors in...
Denial effect.
Denial, sure. Yeah. I hadn't been to a medical doctor in 40 years or so. I was my own doctor. And one of my favorite sayings was, only a fool has himself for a doctor. But I was the exception, of course. So it was okay for me. Well, the doctors at Waterbury Hospital, who were wonderful, and the nurses, the staff, everyone was so kind and so helpful. I was there 3 days before I transferred to Yale New Haven, and they said, well, we got to try and figure out why this happened. You probably have blockages. We want to do a basic test, run a catheter up through your arteries into your heart and take some pictures and see if there are blockages. And of course, I was very confident. I said, I don't have any blockages.
There's nothing wrong with me.
I'm on a great diet.
I'm on Schmid.
It must be just the Lyme disease. I don't have any blockages. They said, well, we really have to see. We have to find out. And I agreed. Okay, well, let's do that. So they did the catheterization, and the doctor doing the catheterization said, well, his arteries are perfect. So, of course, that made me a little more... my arrogance had been knocked down by then. I didn't think I knew it all anymore, but I was confident that my arteries were fine because of the wonderful diet I've been on for 40 years or so, which I'll tell you about later, but it's basically grass-fed meat and fresh raw vegetables and raw dairy products and all kinds of good things that used to be on the farm 100 years ago. That's another story, but just if I may,
living naturally.
Yeah, well, according to the wisdom of our ancestors is how I see it.
Right.
At any rate, my arteries were fine, so why did I have this heart problem? Incredible, and it was very severe. They measure your ejection fraction, which is what percent of the blood is ejected from the left ventricle each time the heart beats, and should be at least 55 or 60. Mine was 30, which is on the brink of going under. I couldn't walk across the room without breathing. Everything had become much worse in that 2 weeks or so before I went to the hospital. So I surmised that the only reason could be from Lyme disease. I thought it had to be some effect of Lyme disease is known to affect the heart, and I thought it must have affected my heart so adversely, even though I was functioning and doing other things and very well, playing tennis and so forth until those last 2 weeks. Anyway, doctor said, no, we don't think it's the Lyme disease, but I insisted it was the Lyme disease at that point. At any rate, I was at Waterbury for 3 days, and my doctors there convinced me to go to Yale New Haven to see specialists there in electrophysiology because they thought I needed a pacemaker. I had a severe arrhythmia, enlarged heart, cardiomyopathy, which is
cameras here.
Cells of the heart had died, and then the heart had enlarged to compensate. So I transferred to Yale New Haven and met with a marvelous team of doctors there. And this was about the third or fourth day, but I still was really feeling very desperate because if it was Lyme disease, and I thought that I had been able to deal with the Lyme disease and I hadn't been able to, then it was, what could they do for me? In fact, they didn't even believe in chronic Lyme disease. They said, well, we really don't think that that's a factor. We don't really see that. they didn't know why the problem had developed. They call it idiopathic. We don't know. Well, I felt like I had to understand what had happened, so I got my iPad. My family brought my iPad on Friday or Saturday. And Saturday night, I'm all night long reading articles on the internet. And I remembered that I had seen something years ago about excess doses of cod liver oil causing heart problems in mice in experiments that had been written up and published in medical journals. And I do a lot of research in that area, and I'd written a couple of books, and I'd kind of brushed that off because I had seen cod liver oil do so much good for people over the course of my 30-plus year career as a naturopathic physician that I started taking large amounts of it back in medical school 30 years ago, and I had taken 1, 2, 3 tablespoons a day for over 30 years. And I had actually stopped a couple of weeks before I was hospitalized because I just had something intuitive saying to me, look, maybe I'm overdoing this. So remembering that, I looked up, I Googled heart disease and cod liver oil, and I found these articles about experiments that had been done in the 1920s with mice, giving them large doses of cod liver oil, and lo and behold, the doctors had created the same problems that I had in my heart that the mice had had. So I was like this one-person experiment doing this huge amount of cod liver oil for the last 30 years, and I thought this must be what caused my heart problems. I explained this, and I got the copies of the papers and showed them to these world-renowned electrophysiologists and cardiac people at Yale New Haven, and they kind of scratched their heads and said, well,
that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, maybe we don't know what caused it, but whatever, we got to do something about it, right? So I was there for 11 days, and 8 days, 3 days at Waterbury and 8 days there, and they helped me a great deal. They got me, they prescribed about 9 different drugs, 3 of which were really important and that I actually, in my opinion, needed. And I did my studying and made my judgments, and I used the 3 things that were necessary to slow my heart rate, bring my blood pressure way down, get the fluids off that had built up because of my heart's weakness, and basically allowed my heart to start recovering.
Right.
And that was 9 months ago. And right now I'm on about 1/5 the dosage of those 3 drugs that I was on when I left the hospital. I continue to use them. But over the course of the 9 months, I've basically rebuilt my system, my cardiovascular system. I'm playing singles tennis again. I'm walking 4, 5, 6 miles a day at a very rapid pace.
Beautiful.
I feel good. I'm not 100%. I think it's going to take me years to get back, really, because I was literally poisoning myself for some 30 years, overdoing it. Cod liver oil is a wonderful thing and does so many good things for people, but you can drink too much water.
You're getting it from Norway, right?
We have different sources.
Right.
Really. We have different products with cod liver oil,
and
I continue to recommend modest doses, half a teaspoon, to most of our clients, most of my patients, and the people who purchase supplements from us. It really is a wonderful food supplement, but I'm disciplined to a fault, and I just plain overdid it.
That's the first step, though, in just believing your story. You know you overdid it a little bit. So you said it, you diagnosed yourself. If you're at Yale New Haven Hospital and you did the diagnosing, something's wrong with that picture. So I was just so moved by that. I'm like, I got to have this guy in as a guest.
Well, thank you.
Callers out there, you've got a naturopathic guru, 203-757-1320. We'll take some calls.
Yeah.
All right, keep rolling.
Well, Ellie's story, I mean, you want to tell it?
Well,
lean up to the microphone.
Okay.
I'll help you, okay?
Let's see. 2 years ago, I had a very severe headache, and I was on the phone with my mother, and I told her, you know what, Mom, I'm going to go and get an aspirin. I have a bad headache. No, a splitting headache, which is actually pretty diagnostic when you say it that way. Splitting headache. And I hung up the phone, and I laid down on the ground and had a stroke.
Right.
I was in a coma thereafter for a couple of months, and all this stuff went on while I was in a coma that, of course, I'm not aware of. But when I woke up out of the coma, and I did not, know that I had been in one, because I had been someone who was very physically active before, I kind of wondered why my body didn't, seem as alive and alert as it normally used to be. But eventually it came to my consciousness that I had been, asleep for a while. And anyway, basically I am considered a very fortunate person. Very few people that have had the kind of aneurysm I had survive, let alone have full capability that I have. So I'm very thankful for that.
Hold that thought, because I'm going to brag about your tennis game. We have a caller on line 1. You have a question for Dr. Ron?
Yes, I do.
Love it. Thanks for listening to the show. He's here in the studio. One moment. Go ahead.
I was wondering, is there any kind of natural approach to chronic venous insufficiency?
Yes, the kind of diet, the kind of diet that Ellie and I have followed for many, many, many years is really the beginning of dealing with that, and it involves understanding that our cholesterol and animal fats are not really what's behind heart disease and blockages of arteries that lead to venous insufficiency. The natural human diet consists of lots of quality grass-fed meat and wild seafood and fresh vegetables in the form of salads and cooked vegetables, especially green vegetables. Quality raw dairy products, and pasteurized dairy products that you can find in certain natural food stores that are made from the milk from animals that are carefully fed, properly fed, and eggs from chickens that are out at pasture. And eating these kinds of foods is very conducive to healing from problems like venous insufficiency. There are specific natural supplements that we use to help address the problem and help with recovery from that. Of course, when I recommend things like that, I do a thorough medical history first and understand really the nature of your problems and your likes and dislikes and other medical conditions that might be going on. But there certainly are ways to help, and I would suggest that you look at our website, World Wide Web, drrons.com, drrons.com, and read the articles there. And if you're interested in learning more, there's a contact form where you can email me and tell me more specifically about you and your problems, and I'll email advice back to you about that. And if I think it's appropriate that you have an appointment with me, I'll suggest that. But, I'll try to help you that way. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I've been going through this for 5 years now, and it's getting a little bit too much to handle. And when you go to conventional doctors, the only thing they want to do is cut you open and try to fix things.
Well, I know that sometimes that's the case, but there also are some really wonderful conventional doctors out there who perform their own miracles. It's a question of who you're working with. If you have cardiovascular problems, heart problems that are related to your venous insufficiency, I'll send you to one of the two very wonderful cardiologists that worked with me over the course of the last year. The doctors who worked with Ellie saved her life with two incredible brain surgeries that she went through when she first had her stroke, and then 2 months later she had a second surgery that has enabled her to recover. So there's really a way for us to work together. But you email me about your issues, and I'll see if I can help you. Okay?
Okay, great.
Thanks for calling.
If for some reason you have a little trouble finding him, just call the radio show at 1320, and we'll have all his contact information here as well.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Producer Tom's telling me a quick break, Ellen will continue with your awesome life story. When we are back, we'll take a 2-minute break. We'll be right back.